Greetings friends and welcome to a 40k lore breakdown video analysis for the new animated series, Codex. I'm Lorcan and this is OnlyWar. I hadn't intended to follow up the Dark Tide analysis with another similar video so soon, but it's a fantastic time in the hobby right now, with lots of talented, passionate animators out there, and I've been very excited for this one, after seeing the screenshots a little while back. Huge thanks to the guys behind Codex for giving me permission to use their footage in this lore breakdown. If you haven't been on their page, please make sure you give them a like and subscribe on the link below. So in this analysis I'll play the trailer through as it's only short, and give some overall thoughts, and then give a more detailed breakdown of some of the lore behind the trailer afterwards. Please bear in mind that 40k lore is massive and complex, and we all come in with different knowledge levels, so there'll be a few basics in there to not completely lose folk who are newer to the lore. And there we have it. A very promising trailer in many ways, so let's have a look at some of the scenes in a bit more detail. So the trailer starts off setting the tense atmosphere and pacing through the use of an alarm. We see the metal grille flooring, but it's not really clear if this is a boarding action on a spacecraft or a ground-based assault happening in an industrial manufactorum or a hive setting. We have our first proper look at the human forces of the Imperial Army contingent here. Now I'm saying the Imperial Army, not the Imperial Guard or the Astra Militarum as they'd be known in the current setting, because as we'll discuss in more detail later, the setting for this series is at least 10 millennia prior to the current present-day timeline. During this period, known as the Great Crusade, the Imperial Army contained ground, air and space assets all within the same table of organisation, unlike the Astra Militarum of the late 41st millennium, which is separated from the Imperial Navy. The Great Crusade in the late 30th millennium was highly successful, and the Emperor conquered a large swathe of the galaxy and forged the Imperium of Man in his vision of the Imperial Truth. As more systems were brought into compliance, though, the need for manpower in the ever-expanding Imperium went hand in hand with that success. The Big E most likely realised that his Legiones Astartes, while fantastic agents of war and conquest, would not have the numbers to protect a galaxy-spanning empire, while remaining an effective fighting force. From this reality, the Imperial Army was born. Billions of second line and support troops, staff officers, labourers, etc. Unlike the present day where the Imperial Guard serves as mankind's first line armed force in the defence of the Emperor's realm, during the Great Crusade the Imperial Army was mostly a reserve force. Its troops were tasked with garrison duty or mopping up operations, and only in the last decades of the Great Campaign did they fight with regularity alongside Astartes' legions. We've got a wee bit of background info about these troopers from the animators, and they've said they're from an original regiment of the Imperialis Auxilia called Extimus Blacks. For the war gear, we'll start off with their armour. I don't think he's wearing solar pattern void armour like the elite solar Auxilia of the time. There are similarities to more recent Tempestus Scion's carapace armour, but it's more likely just heavier flak armour. I like the choices the animators have made here to make them look like they could actually be capable of supporting superhuman Astartes, but still differentiating them as regular humans. The lasgun being used at this time would most likely have been a Calibrax pattern las rifle, which was the standard armament during the Great Crusade, with a longer range and more robust construction than later lasgun patterns. It was also designed to be able to accept numerous different attachments and be able to vary the charge setting for more powerful charged shots at some increased risk to the user. The design also looks a bit like the Lucius pattern made famous by the Death Corps of Krieg, so extra points from me there. The Lucius is also designed to operate at a higher charge rate than many other common patterns of lasgun, giving more punch but draining the power pack more quickly. Barrel of the Lucius is its most distinctive feature, and this feature is also seen on this gun. It's a series of heat sinks to dissipate the excessive heat buildup of the increased energy output. This fits well with a weapon that may be able to send out more powerful shots. And after getting our first look at the prone body of one of our troopers, we get our first proper look at the Astartes involved in this particular engagement. And what we have is a member of the Iron Warriors Legion. A legion that would eventually fall on the side of the traitors during the great conflict known as the Horus Heresy. The choice of an Iron Warrior from this period in the timeline is a really good one in my view. If nothing else, it gives them a bit of due for their diligent service and many great sacrifices during the Great Crusade, which they would always insist was never forthcoming at the time. So as briefly as I can, while still setting the scene for those newer to the lore, who were the Iron Warriors and what might their part be in this scenario? Founded as the 4th Legion during the closing stages of the Unification Wars on Terra, which predate the Emperor's Great Crusade, the 4th Legion's gene seed proved to be of above average adaptability and had a low rate of implant rejection. This meant that the 4th Legion was very swiftly put into active service. They were a favoured legion initially, being led by the Emperor himself in some engagements, and their early successes were rewarded with primary resupply of newer weapons and war machines and short-term increased intake of Terran recruits. Being one of the most numerous legions, and with proven success in battle during the earliest years of the Crusade, enabled its forces to be successfully split between several substantial early expeditionary fleets. The 4th Legion was not reunited with their Primarch, Perturabo, until the late 840s of the 30th millennium. As the solar forces of the Great Crusade went beyond the boundaries of the Segmentum Solar, pushing onwards with the Great Crusade's expansion, the 4th Legion quickly lost any specific ties to Terra, and although it was often at the very forefront of the expansion, its methods of warfare and military formation remained quite rigidly unchanged. As a result, regardless of circumstances or enemy, the Legion was wont to overcome any obstacles or difficulties they encountered with meticulously applied and relentless force of arms alone, rather than cunning stratagems or bloody-handed heroics of their brother legions, who had diverged regardless of whether or not they'd been reunited with their Primarch. For some in command, these traits were positives. The 4th Legion were highly reliable in any deployment, so accordingly was increasingly used to fight inglorious but vital campaigns of backbreaking the highest level to withdraw. This came to a head during the liberation of the Forge World in Caladion. In a grueling campaign lasting over a solar year, in which while victory was achieved, the 8th Expeditionary Fleet's frontline forces were nearly annihilated, including many of their most senior commanders and veterans, as they refused to withdraw from the field after a failed initial assault. It was to this damaged and fractured 4th Legion, without a clear direction of its own, that their Primarch Perturabo finally came. Now Perturabo and the circumstances around the Iron Warriors and their actions under their Primarch and eventual fall to heresy are fascinating. But let's just say that if the poorly treated, if misguidedly stubborn 4th Legion were hoping for a happy reunion with their Gene Father, they got a rude awakening. After a brief period in the Big E's company, fighting alongside him and consuming knowledge of the Great Crusade, Perturabo was handed command of the 4th Legion, which bore his gene seed. He instituted a full review, comparing the 4th Legion's war record, doctrines and practices against other legions, and found his sons wanting, and acted accordingly. His punishment? Decimation. 1 in 10 of the Legion, determined by random lottery, was put to death without honour. The deed carried out by his own comrades in the Legion. Those who survived the 4th Legion's self-decimation, the lesson was plain. Such was to be the rule under Perturabo, ruthless and unforgiving, and without favour or preference. These are the Marines that we have here. Before being reunited with Perturabo, the 4th Legion bore the insignia of the Winged Bolt from the 8th Expeditionary Force, but this was replaced by the Iron Skull that we see here, once they were renamed the Iron Warriors. The Roman numeral on his left shoulder is for the number 96. Now I'm not 100% sure on this one, that could be a chapter number. Based on the Great Crusade organisation of each chapter having over 1,000 Astartes, and the Iron Warriors numbers being estimated at a legion strength of between 130 and 150,000 Astartes at this point, having close to 100 chapters would not be unreasonable. The right knee is the squad number. It's 4. He's wearing either Mark II or Mark III power armor, which were two patterns being used during this time frame. The two are quite difficult to distinguish at face value, and this is not surprising as the Mark III was never intended to replace the Mark II. We'll talk more about his war gear a little later on in the video. Back to panning up to our trooper corpse, and we can see his injury and the first real clue to the threat being faced. In the armour we can see what looks like green shards that have punctured the right side of his chest plate and remain lodged there. These are the only obvious entry wounds. We're still left guessing for now if this type of ammo could be from a manufactured weapon such as a splinter gun, or indeed from many known life forms, including the bioweapons of the Tyranids. Back to the Astartes now, and we can see that our brother is joined by two more. Our original brother is not the central one, who sports an iron halo mounted on his backpack. These prestigious relics provide a protective conversion field around the wearer, and would be quite a precious artifact for the chapter. They are a Legion Breacher squad. These specialised formations were used during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy eras of the late 30th and 31st millennia. They utilised specialised tactics and war gear for the explicit purpose of acting as a vanguard assault force in the worst combat conditions imaginable, known to the legions as zones mortalis, for the sheer likelihood of death faced by any who were forced to fight within them. Several of the legions, such as the Imperial Fists and the World Eaters, commonly employed these formations, and the Iron Warriors, who were often tasked with these bloody modes of warfare, soon made their use a speciality. Breacher siege squads were equipped with specially customised and augmented suits of hardened power armour, usually variants of the Mark III iron pattern, modified by the Legion's tech marines to better withstand the rigours of siege warfare, lethal environments and close-quarter boarding actions. They often employed heavy boarding shields in a tower style comprised of ceramite and plasteel, which also contain a small field generator similar to a storm shield. This allowed assault units to absorb sustained incoming fire that normally accompanies the first breach in a void ship's hull, or during defensive siege operations, following the first breach when you might expect concentrated enemy fire. We see the Marine on the left of the screen taking incoming fire on his shield that has a green tinge and mirrors the shards seen on the trooper earlier. The presence of an Aegis defense line being used for cover could indicate this is a defensive action, but these fortifications can be forward deployed to hold ground while on the offensive, so it could still go either way. Mark III power armor was developed when the Great Crusade reached the planets towards the core of the galaxy. Some of the worlds encountered there were inhabited by independent, stubborn beings who populated vast underground complexes where they mined and grew beards, and I think you can see where this is heading. Anyway, the conditions of the fighting in this campaign and the high casualties in these and other similar environments such as during boarding actions led to the development of the Mark III model of power armor. Best suited for boarding actions and combat in confined complexes with little cover, this armor was ideal when combat was simply a matter of brute force frontal assault and ideally suited the style of warfare favoured by the Iron Warriors. All three appear to be armed with bolt guns, which have elements that look like they are of the Phobos pattern, particularly the magazine, but also have elements that look a little bit like earlier Godwin patterns like the Mark III. Back to the corpse, and we pan up to reveal the Xenos threat that the Imperial forces are fighting, and we can see that it is a member of the Drukhari, the Dark Eldar. The Drukhari, or Dark Eldar, are one of the remaining factions of the ancient Eldari civilization that was once ascendant in the galaxy before the descent into decadence and depravity that led to the birth of the chaos god known as Slanesh, and the collapse of their civilization, at the cost of trillions of Eldari lives. The aristocracy of the ancient Eldari society, who possessed the wealth and time to truly explore the excesses of decadence, promoted the pleasure cults which became a centerpiece of Eldari society, and many demanded the construction of entire sub-realms within a labyrinth dimension known as the Eldari Webway, in which to indulge their pursuit of ever more deadly and sadistic pleasures. Much of the Webway was shattered into ruin by the fall of the Eldari society. But those Eldari who were able to build their own jealously guarded empires in the Webway remained physically unaffected by Slanesh's birth, to an extent. In their arrogance, they didn't end their quest for excess and decadent pleasure. The change that was wrought upon these Eldari sealed within the webway was more subtle. Rather than having their psychic essences, their souls, consumed in one great go by the birth of Slaanesh, they were instead slowly drained into the warp, taken in time by the god that they call She Who Thirsts. However, the Drukhari discovered that as long as they seeped themselves in the most evil and savagely decadent acts, the curse of Slaanesh upon their souls could be delayed. The psychic energy generated by the suffering and agony of others nourished their diminished souls and kept them vital and strong. Assuming that they could feed regularly upon the miseries of other intelligent beings, the Eldari of the webway became physically immune to the passage of time, earning a twisted form of immortality. This unholy appetite became known as the thirst, and led the Drukhari to be known as pirates and slavers. The Drukhari are sadistic reavers, to whom the sentient races of the galaxy are but cattle, to be enslaved and tortured at will. They strike with precision, hard and fast from the shadows of the webway, vanishing again with their living plunder before any retaliation is often possible. We can see he is wearing the segmented plate armor commonly worn by Kabbalite warriors throughout Drukhari society. It is made of advanced metal alloys to be more durable, while also allowing responsive and graceful movement. In addition to sporting many blades and hooks with which to inflict pain on their enemies, each suit of armor is held in place by a variety of internal barbs that constantly trigger the pain receptors in the wearer's flesh, heightening their sensation of combat. With the Drukhari being revealed as the enemy being engaged, we can now deduce that the green shards and the wounds on the trooper were indeed from a splinter weapon. Splinter weapons, as the name suggests, fire shards of crystal, using a powerful magnetoelectric pulse. These shards are covered in deadly, fast-acting toxins to ensure a painful death in the victim. The splinter rifle is the favoured armament of the Kabbalite warrior, while its handheld cousin, the splinter pistol, is beloved of assassins for its precise, short-range shot and likelihood of death from even the smallest wound. And there we have the trailer for the very promising new animated series Codex, ending with that lovely closing shots. A couple of final thoughts from me. I'm very happy the animators chose to set this series in the Great Crusade era. Other animators like the guys behind Astartes and Soda's recent work have been set in the current or at least reasonably recent timeline, so going back is refreshing. I'm also really glad we have Loyalist Iron Warriors being given the spotlight. They had a number of notable engagements that would make excellent stories to tell. Their first major engagement of the 4th Legion, under the direct command of their Primarch, was a campaign against the self-styled Black Judges. These self-appointed arbiters of human purity, life and death were twisted, withered creatures with extended lifespans in the millennia, which they gained through regular infusions of human genetic material. Sustained by their arcane sciences, each Black Judge had an armoured life support frame with massive firepower that were all but impervious to bolter fire. Yikes. After bringing the cluster into compliance, Perturabo's own 125th Expeditionary Fleet was driven into the teeth of deadly foe after deadly foe, not least of which the xenoform known as the Harud. All actions in the history of the Great Crusade against the Harud had proved costly both in terms of lives and the sanity of those who survived fighting nightmares that could appear to manipulate the flow of time itself to make metal corrode and flesh immediately go necrotic as tissues were aged well beyond normal limits. Both the Black Judges and the Harud would have given the animators more room to play with. They could have had more artistic license in how they represented these lesser-known Xenos. In selecting the Drukhari, they've made a very bold choice. Despite their vile nature, the Drukhari are the epitome of physical excellence. They're renowned for their athleticism, grace, and speed. Representing this will present quite the challenge for the creators of Codex, and I look forward to seeing how they'll handle it. I am really looking forward to seeing how they build on what looks like a really promising trailer though. And if you are too, and want to support the project, then please make sure you check out their link in the description below. I hope you've liked this look at the lore behind the Codex trailer. If you have, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to the channel for more 40k content. Your support of these videos means a lot. Back to the Charadon system for the Imperium's Most Wanted coming up next, unless I get distracted by the Harud. the release of Liber Xenologist next year might just make me hold off doing a video on them in the hope that we get some more love for these lesser known Xenos. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the Codex trailer and seeing the loyalist Iron Warriors against the deadly Drukhari. And I'll see you again in the near future, where there is only war.